Morning, Nuggets. So today we're going to do Unit 2, the cell, and I'm going to do my best to share the screen so that we know what's going on today. I want to let you all know that since the test is open book and open note, I want to make a suggestion that from here on out, when you all start to watch the videos or to do notes or whatever, I would suggest that you start keeping yourself a notebook. So one, let's get ourselves a notebook just for the AP test. And then two, I would section that notebook off with like tabs or whatever. And once you get your notebook sectioned off with tabs, that's going to make it easier for you to keep things in order, because if it's open book and open note, you can always refer to things you already have in your notebook once you get started with the test, because you're not going to be able to Google and it's going to be really hard to find things in your book. So for whatever we go over, I would go ahead and make my own notes. So today, when we start going over Unit 2, which is the cell, you can have your own notes in your own notebook and a section called the cell. And so even if you don't feel like you get a whole lot on your Zoom, you've got plenty of stuff that you can go back to on your notebook when you go and get ready to take your test on May the 18th. So today we're just going to start with a tour of the cell. We're just going to start with simple junk that you all learned in Bio 1. And we're going to do a prokaryote and a eukaryotic cell, because these are the two overarching types of cells. We're going to do a little bitty chart that you all are going to put on your notes today with the characteristics of both. It's not like y'all have never seen these before. So I think this is going to be an easy review for you. So as we go through the characteristics of both a prokaryotic and a eukaryotic cell, things you need to focus on. Number one, what are the differences between the two cells? Number two, what are the organelles, structure and function of the organelles in both cells? Okay, number three, what are the subcomponents of maybe those organelles? Number four, what are the membranes in those organelles? What are the membranes in the actual cells? And number five, how do cell size and shape affect the nutrients that are, or the rate of nutrient intake and waste disposal? And how do those bad boys get done in the cell? And so, you know, it's not that complicated. It's just, it's going to be a little bit of stuff you need to review from way long time ago. So let's look. First characteristic we're going to talk about today is a plasma membrane. And by the way, after we get finished with every little review, I'm going to try to do these once a day. And so you can look at them at your leisure. And then after we get done with the little review on whatever we're doing that day, I'll try to have one FRQ that's loaded. I'll probably just give you credit for doing the FRQ, and I'll try to get them scored as best I can quickly. But you'll get credit just for doing them. You won't get a grade on them. So, plasma membrane. Prokaryotes and eukaryotes, yes and yes. Both of these bad boys have to have a plasma membrane, which controls what enters and leaves the cell. So remember, when you're doing the differences between the cell and you're doing the organelles, don't forget, put junk in your pocket like functions. Make sure that you have a little chart written out where you've got the functions of each of the structures. And so even if we don't go over it today, you can go back and you can look at it, but it's also in your hand. So when you are quickly trying to flip through it on the test, if they do ask you something, you can go back to it. Let's look at number two, second big picture organelle, ribosomes. Remember that ribosomes make proteins, and both prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells have got to have a ribosome. No way around it. Ribosomes are essential for the function of the cell, because those proteins, you know, they make up other cellular components and other organelles. The third thing we're going to talk about are membrane-bound organelles. Give you a second to think about this. Do prokaryotes and eukaryotes have membrane-bound organelles? Dun, 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 dun. As Carol Baskin would say, okay, all you cool cats and kittens, you know that prokaryotes do not have membrane-bound organelles, but eukaryotes do have membrane-bound organelles. And the last thing we're left with is the nucleus. And of course, you also know that prokaryotes do not have a nucleus, but membrane-bounds do have a nucleus. And when you're talking about prokaryotes size-wise, about 1 and about 10 to 100. So we are dealing with quite a bit of size difference on the two. Eukaryotes are way bigger. These bad boys are found in the domain bacteria or the domain archaea. And so these are everything else. Protists, plants, animals, fungi. And so you know that the bacteria are over here and everything else is in the eukaryotic cell. Let's talk about prokaryotes specifically, because we got through our section on a lot of the DNA, but we didn't get through a whole lot of bacteria discussion. So let's talk about the domain bacteria and the domain archaea. Oh, I hope I could spell correctly, which that is not correct. Let's fix that. All right. So members of these are these are the two domains of the bacteria, and they are basically, let's talk about the DNA in them. They have a singular circular chromosome. Remember where that was found? That's found in the nucleoid region, because remember, they don't have a nucleus. They do have a nucleoid. No nuclear membrane. No nucleus. No true nucleus. No membrane-bound organelles. And so if you have all of these things written down in your notes as you go through this, if they do give you a specific discussion of just basic cellular function, you can write these things down quickly. And you know they're smaller. So that's a little introduction to prokaryotic cells. And of course, prokaryotes are your bacteria. Let's talk a little bit about eukaryotic cells. In eukaryotes, of course, you do have a membrane-bound nucleus. Remember, eukaryotes are plants, animals, protists, and fungi. And so details about eukaryotes that you'd know, they do have a membrane enclosed nucleus. They do have membrane-bound organelles. And they are larger. And then if you try to break those things down, I think if they give you anything about the eukaryotic cell on that test, it's probably going to be the difference between plant and animals. And so I would focus on maybe doing myself, if I did a T-chart of the eukaryotic cells, I would put plants here, go over specific organelle differences. So let's talk about those. How about chloroplast, size and function of the vacuole, and cell wall. Over here on the animal cell. And of course, if you even go into mitosis, right here you've got a cell plate in telophase, or funny guys on the video calling it telophase. Telophase. And then an animal cell, of course, you got no chloroplast. You've got small vacuoles. But what vacuoles did we learn about in different animal cells? Well, if you happen to be doing protists, you've got things like contractile vacuoles that help them to control water into and out of the cell. Or you may have food vacuoles in lesser critters that don't have a true digestive system to get food in and out. And so those are the things you're going to focus on with the difference of plant and animal cells. I would go through all of the organelles on a plant and animal just so that you've refreshed them. And I would make sure I knew what was what with the organelles. And so you can have a good discussion of surface area to volume ratio. I would be able to work out a question on surface area to volume ratio, especially when we did a cell like a 1 millimeter versus a 2 millimeter versus a 3 or centimeter, whatever you want to use, I don't care. And I would talk about the surface area to volume ratio in all those and be able to discuss which is the most efficient and which is the least efficient of those cells. So you need to be able to calculate those. And you might also, when you talk about plant and animal cells, because you're going to go ahead and do yourself your own little review of the plant and animal cells, and you're going to do maybe yourselves a little chart with the organelles. I would also go over here and function on, or look in your, I know they're not going to do a whole lot on plants, but there's things that you need to know about plant cells and animal cells that would have to do with movement of nutrients into and out of the cells. And one of the things that I see in a review guide is it says there is a little discussion on how each of these structures enhance the exchange of molecules. Well, what may those molecules be? Be a molecule of water. It could be your 4 macromolecules, which we discussed in the last section, Unit 1, carbs, lipids, proteins, nucleic acids. But the 3 it particularly gives you are these. Number 1, root hairs. Number 2, of course, this would be specifically functioning on a plant cell. Number 2, microvilli. This would specifically be functioning or be a function of the digestive system of an animal. And then the last one it gives you, which I thought was a ringer, is the cristae of the mitochondria. And remember, if they're going to give you a free response question, I think it's going to be a very all-encompassing question. So you might want to focus on specific differences in mitochondria and chloroplast. But we'll talk about those more when we get to the section on photosynthesis and respiration. So today, that's just basically your introduction. I'm going to load a free response question on your AP Classroom. I will load this video to Remind and OneNote and let you know what your FRQ is. I would appreciate if you would get those FRQs done. I'll probably do one a day. And so as I go over something, I'll try to find an FRQ that focuses on that. And remember, you're not doing the FRQ so that you can submit it and, you know, me grade it and say, oh, you stink at that, or you need to really review that. The purpose of that FRQ is so that you can take yourself notes as you're doing it. Because remember, this is going to be open note, open book at your house, then this needs to be something where you have a good stream of information that you've written down, because remember, you remember more of what you write than just what you read or what you see or what you hear. So if you write it down, you'll have a better understanding of those. So tomorrow I will focus on the endomembrane system of Unit 2. And once we go through the endomembrane system and how cells are organized, and we talk a little bit about the membranes. This is just a big unit on the cell, but I'll try to get you a good little detailed discussion of it. I'll try to load these daily, and then you can look at them once a day, or you can look at them on Sundays when you get a minute, or Saturdays when you get a minute. You don't have to go to work. But if you have any questions, as always, you can email me or shoot me a note on Remind, and we are good to go. So thank y'all for joining in today. Let me know if you need me. Thanks a lot.